Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back to the On podcast. We've been joined today by Shadi Hamid, a leading, one of the most influential contemporary thinkers on religion, democracy, and American foreign policy. Currently, he's a columnist at the Washington Post. He has written extensively on the Middle East, political Islam, and the moral contradictions of U.S. power. His past work challenged both Western assumptions about democracy and progressive discomfort with global leadership. But now he seems to be arguing for American power and how we can put it to use. Shadi, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
No, it's been a pleasure. Now, you've come out with a new book. Shadi Hamid's new book is called The Case for American Power. And in essence, you're arguing that it's better to err on the side of ambition. And is that ambition the idea of an America as opposed to what it has actually been and has become? And you think because it sets out a bigger goal for itself, therefore erring on that side is safer, or is it just the principle of that idea, or is also the, which you also mentioned in your book, that is it the also the unmatched power that the American empire enjoys?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, the first thing is when I talk about ambition, I'm talking about matching our power with a sense of morality. Morality is very important to me in this book. I want America to use its power for moral and just ends, and ends that are also aligned, quite frankly, with my own religion, Islam. And I want to see a better world. I want to see Muslims enjoying more rights abroad. And I think that the U.S. can be a vehicle for that. And there's a couple different ways of looking at it. I mean, one is to say that America is the only option, in the sense that someone has to wield power. Power is a reality of life. So I think that I'm coming to these conclusions as a kind of pragmatic move too, that we are preferable to the available alternatives, we as Americans are. And the alternatives here are primarily China and Russia. So when you look at it from that perspective, US power looks more appealing. But I do say in the book that I came to these conclusions neither easily nor enthusiastically. I'm not some kind of cheerleader for American power. I'm not some kind of neocon. I actually have my own doubts about my own arguments. So part of this book is about me working through my own doubts in real time and hoping that the reader will walk along with me, because I think readers should wrestle with this too. People have very complex emotions about America. America it arouses complicated feelings because the rest of the world is watching everything America does. The rest of the world is influenced by what America does. So all of us have a stake in these kinds of questions.
It's a very fascinating analysis, and I think it's very appropriate that you preface that these are not conclusions that you arrive at with great pleasure and glee and giddy. It's with the understanding that the American project so far has not been all that it's been chalked up to, but regardless, it is the amalgam of power and this vision of this higher moral vision, this ambition of morality, of higher moral order, which you quote, you use Theodore Roosevelt's quote, "Our chief usefulness to humanity rests on combining power with high purpose." In the post-Gaza, in the post-7th of October situation, where you have not only, neocon, very pro-Zionist policy being implemented as a foreign policy agenda, but even domestically. You've had Governor Abbott in Texas ban the CARE organization. You recently had Sami Hamdi, who's a advocate and a media personality from the UK, who went around campaigning during the previous election, as well as this time around he was lobbying for, against the Zionist lobby in America, for the Muslim vote to sort of mobilize, even as small as that it might be in America. And he's been detained for 2 weeks and has finally been let go. And with the ICE deportations in general that have been going on, how relevant do you think this book is in this context? I mean, it does seem a bit, the fact that you have to preface it by saying, I'm not giddy about this outcome, it does seem a bit, out, I wouldn't say in poor taste, but a bit out of touch, maybe.
Look, I mean, it could be out of touch. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not looking for popularity here. Obviously, I want the book to sell, but I do believe in this message. And I sort of see this book as an anguished manifesto, and I want people to kind of sit with it and ponder it and be challenged by it. It is unfortunate that Donald Trump is our president and he makes American power look worse. And I make that very clear in the book, that up until Donald Trump, every American president has talked about what Teddy Roosevelt talked about, matching American power with America's moral purpose, right? Donald Trump does not do that. And what I'm saying, I really want to persuade young people, progressives, Arabs, and Muslims, and say, despite how bad Donald Trump is, America is worth fighting for and believing in. So it's a way of actually countering the moment and pushing back and saying, yes, a lot of people are giving up hope. Yes, the Trump administration and Republicans are clamping down on Muslims in this country. As you mentioned a couple examples. That is really scary. But then the question is, what do we do about that? Do we just throw up our hands and say America is done? Or do we try to come up with some kind of alternative that can inspire people? So I want people to pick up this book and to think about how American power can be revived and used for better ends. And yes, we have a terrible record. It's not just Donald Trump. And I have a whole chapter called Hypocrisy, where I catalog all the sins that we've committed in Latin America, parts of Africa and Asia, and of course the Middle East too. And Muslims have been on the receiving end of American power for so long. So I totally get that, and I also realize that people won't be totally comfortable with this argument. I am an American, I should say that. I mean, it's obvious, but that also means that I have a built-in bias. So when I'm talking to people from other countries, they may not fully get where I'm coming from. We always have a bias for, or not all of us, but many of us have a bias for our own country, and we want to see our own country do well. And I think a lot of Americans, we want to see our own country be the dominant superpower. Is that anyway? Yeah. So that's what I'd say.
I
on
mean,
that.
you keep repeating the fact that you think you're an American, but I don't think Laura Loomer and these types would agree that you're an American. And they seem to have a run of the White House right now. And not to simply singularly demonize the Trump administration, but I mean, you made a big claim when you said that, up until Trump, the ideas that were espoused by American presidents were the idea of this high purpose, combining high purpose with power. But that wasn't the case when George Bush describes his war in the Middle East as a crusade against Gog and Magog, or it's not the case when Obama goes out and he assassinates American citizens, like Roman citizens were assassinated in Yemen. Every Tuesday, every Wednesday, kill lists were put out. Drone hits were put out on women and children. So I don't know if that particular espousal is again, you said again, you prefaced it with, I'm an American, so I want America to be the good guy, if I had to simplify it. But even as an American, shouldn't you be able to objectively see that even if there was lip service provided to those ideals, none of the American presidents, at least in my conscious memory, have espoused these values. And again,
They
it's a
have
pragmatic.
espoused. Yeah, I'll just say they have espoused the values, they just haven't lived up to them. So it's an aspiration that remains unmet.
Right.
But so the rhetoric is there, though.
Sure.
Now, some might say, if it's just rhetoric, what's the point? But at least when you have the rhetoric, you have something to judge the record against. That's the hypocrisy gap. And when we know that American presidents are falling short, we can call them out. If at least they're aspiring to, at least they're saying that they want to be better, that they want to do better things in the world, then the rest of the world can say to Barack Obama or say to George W. Bush, you fell short. You violated and betrayed your ideals. But it's very difficult to say that to Donald Trump because he doesn't even aspire to them. So I'm of the view that it's better to have the aspiration, it's better to have the goal. It's similar to when you're studying for an exam, you shoot for an A, but you might end up getting a C. But at least you're trying to do better instead of the person who's lazy and says, you know what, I'm fine with always getting a C or a D, and I'm never going to try to be better than I actually am.
What you're arguing is the reverse of what people find appealing in Donald Trump. It's the idea that that the American people were sick of the swamp, and they were sick of the doublespeak that came out of what you are describing so aspirationally with such love and such hopefulness and affection is what people would describe as the doublespeak of politicians, where they set up these aspirational goals which were cynically never meant to be actually fulfilled, and because that's the underlying assumption that people have had, because even in America people have been hurting financially since the Obama years especially, and they finally came to the conclusion that en masse we need to go for this outsider, this rude obnoxious guy who doesn't take no for anything. He's our WWE guy. He's our reality TV guy. We've seen him growing up. We've seen him throughout the years, and he's a no nonsense guy. He grabs them by the whatever, and so that's why they like him. And then you're arguing the reverse of that. That no, we need to go back to decency and common decency and the niceties of late night programming, and the whole entertainment landscape, the whole media landscape, everything's been flipped upside down by this one guy not doing the thing that you want, America to do.
Yeah, look, and I take that point that people find Donald Trump appealing and they like him because he says it like it is and he doesn't pretend. But I'm of the view that Donald Trump's approach is not bad. He's appealing. We can understand why people like him. But that doesn't mean that his style, his approach is better than the alternative. But yeah, I'm well aware that Donald Trump, he does away with hypocrisy. No one expects anything of him, so he can't disappoint anyone. No, it's hard to feel betrayed by Donald Trump because we know that he has his own interests at heart, and there's no greater set of ideals. Obviously, the MAGA folks think that he's America first, but it's hard for me to take that seriously. Donald Trump is Donald Trump first. But my view is different about what is appropriate and what is better to have in an American president. But I would pose to you the question of what is the alternative? So we say that we don't like all these things about America. We're disappointed by America time and time again. America has committed all these sins. But it's also true that the world after World War II has been safer, more peaceful, and more democratic. Why? Because look, at the end of World War II, 8% of the world's countries were democracies. By the 1990s, over 50% of the world's countries were democramies.
It feels like, Shadi, you like checking off like a lot of boxes. That's what this whole thing is about, is checking boxes. Because, nominally, we have a lot of democracies now. I live in one. It's called the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. But is it really a democracy, though? Like, I feel like you have a lot of aspirational ideals, and as long as we check off those boxes and we fall short, you're fine with it, because aspirationally the goal is there. And you're sort of, in a cynical sort of way, you're arguing that this unipolar center of power is more or less a force for good, as long as it keeps setting these goals up. Whether it fails to meet them or doesn't allow others to meet them is not the problem. What the problem is that we have no other alternative.
But at some level, we have to reckon with the record. And like I said, if we have had the dramatic expansion of democracy, I actually don't think Pakistan is usually included in the list of democracies. That's like a different story. No. But let's imagine if the U.S. had lost the Cold War to the Soviet Union. Do we think that we would have had the third wave of democratization throughout Eastern Europe and Latin America in the 1990s? No, because communism and socialism would have been the kind of gold standard, and people would have moved more in that direction. So there's a kind of demonstration effect here. And we can also talk about the Marshall Plan of rebuilding Europe post World War II. The U.S. has also militarily intervened in ways that have been positive. I just want to give the other side of the account. So we stopped the Bosnian genocide in No, I mean we did. No, it's just as a was it too late? Yes. Should Bill Clinton have intervened earlier? Of course, but at the end of the day, it was only American power that could have stopped the Bosnian genocide, or the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo in the late 1990s, or when Iraq invaded Kuwait in the first Gulf War. If not for U.S. power, Iraq would have continued occupying Kuwait.
And why is that an outcome that's necessarily worse off than what happened with Iraq and Kuwait specifically?
Because it's not good when countries invade other countries and occupy their people against their will. It's not good.
All right, man. Sure. Fair enough. I mean, it's not a very consistent ideal when it comes to America occupying territories. I mean, and there's also a lot of like hubris involved in this sort of objectivity about how we stopped it. If you look at the case of Bosnia or Afghanistan, Pakistan and the Middle East and the Gulf money and power played a significant role in stopping the spread of communism or the spread of the Soviet Empire or whatever you would like to describe it as. Like, America tends to single itself out in this hubristic fashion that, oh, if American power wasn't behind this, this wasn't happening, as if the local populations and local power centers have no agency and no ability to execute.
Well, local actors do have agency, but the Kuwaitis did not have
Other
any
than
kind
the
of.
Kuwaitis. I'm talking about Bosnia and Afghanistan specifically.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, Bosnians and Kosovars, some of them took up arms, but at the end of the day, they couldn't have done what they did on their own. There had to be outside support and outside air power. But look, I get all the reasons that you're uncomfortable with the argument, but I guess I'd pose the question to you. What would you like to see America do? Would you like to see America just mind its own business and completely withdraw from different regions? Like, what's the realistic plan?
I mean, it's not realistic to expect that America would withdraw from most of the regions in the world, but the idea is that, I mean, it's a fair point that America should aspire to some sort of moral higher ideals instead of, because it's lost a lot of the importance that it has had because of Israel being a sort of blight on their foreign policy. But at the same time, American intervention isn't any better or any worse off than Russian or Soviet, so then Soviet and now Russian or Chinese intervention or any other regional powers interventions like the UAE in the Sudan or the UAE in the Yemen or Saudi in the Yemen. Like, I mean, it's fairly similar to the American intervention or any other intervention.
When was the last time China intervened militarily on behalf of a Muslim population? Has China done anything comparable to what the U.S. did in Bosnia or
Not
Kosovo?
militarily, though. Not militarily.
Yeah,
I've never, no.
exactly. Can you imagine China ever doing that? It's hard.
Why does China have to intervene militarily to help out a Muslim? What about Bangladesh,
exactly.
for example? What about the case for Bangladesh?
I mean, exactly. China would never even consider doing something.
What about
It's
the
not
case for
even an
Bangladesh?
option.
Bangladesh has been very undemocratically led by Hasina Wajid, and it's quite clear that Chinese interference as well as Pakistani helped Bangladesh out of that situation. Why does China have to put boots on the ground and get rebuilding contracts and supplies for Coke and
No, but what I'm
Pepsi
saying
and
is, let's say
McDonald's or
there's a mass slaughter, a genocide like what we saw in Bosnia. Someone has to act to stop it with military force. Now the question is, who is a real candidate for playing that role? China would. It's implausible that China would want to stop. I mean, China committed a genocide against its own Muslim population, the Uyghur Muslims. So it's waged a war on its own people. Yes. This is also, I think, an important argument in my book, that what makes America morally superior it's not just about the record, and we can debate how bad America's record has been, but America is a democracy, which means that we're able to self-correct.
Right.
That we get the government we deserve, we get the foreign policy we deserve. If Chinese people don't like their country's foreign policy, there's no recourse.
No.
And Russia, I think, Russia.
And America's genocide
case.
against its own people is in the past. So, with
you're being sarcastic here. I mean, but
no, I get it. I get it. It's a fair point, man. It's a fair argument because, like, I think about this all the time because, you don't get Americans don't get American people, as far as I've met subjectively, are genuinely very good people, by the way. Very well mannered, very honest, very earnest, decent people. And whether that reflects in the vote or not, again, we can argue otherwise. But it's quite clear compared to China, America is a much freer society. People vote with their feet. It's quite clear people want to migrate to America and not to China globally. This is a global phenomenon. Those are all just matters of record. I agree with you. On the domestic front, at least. In the foreign policy realm, I'm very skeptical about it. America has done some good, like other countries, and has done mostly, horrible things like most countries. I don't find it uniquely special, at least up till now. I mean, I'm not convinced that it's like uniquely special in its outlook and outreach programs. And I've seen some of the worst of it as well. Pakistan was a hotbed for drone strikes during the war on terror. Right. So, like, again, you can make those kinds of arguments that drones are a much more merciful form of munitions as opposed to carpet bombing or whatever. But then those kinds of semantics are very ugly, and I wouldn't like to get into them. I'm not very comfortable with that. Not like from like a media standpoint. But I'm just saying it's retarded to argue whether the casualty counts.
Yeah, but I would never defend those kinds of actions. Don't worry.
No. I'm not saying you would, but I'm saying that a lot of people get into the semantics and the weeds in Pakistan. People used to argue, people who were for the war on terror used to argue that, these are much more humane than carpet bombing. Domestically, I agree with you. Americans have what nobody else on earth probably has, maybe relatively in Western Europe and in Scandinavia, but not on that scale. Like, simply, I joke about this with my friends all the time. It's taken me years to get a gun license. And people think this is something very light, but I think it's a very big deal that Americans can just walk up and they can buy whatever they want and sell whatever they want. That is something exceptional.
I don't know if that's a great example to use, but
I know you're a Democrat, but it's great for us in Pakistan. I think that's a great freedom, man. You just walk up and buy guns. You can just walk up and buy whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, you'll acknowledge that guns have also caused a lot of problems in the U.S.
I don't know, man. I feel like it's a mental health thing.
Look, now you're sounding like a Republican. You're sounding like a MAGA supporter.
This is the thing. Almost Muslim society in America and Europe, I think, are conservatives. Even though it's just the immigration thing that's the problem. I feel like most people would, and didn't most people vote MAGA this time around? Weren't people like Sami Hamdi convincing them to punish the Democrats by voting MAGA? Wasn't that the swing in the Muslim vote this time around? Not that it's a huge vote bank in America. But
there was some movement towards Donald Trump this last time. Yeah, in part because of Gaza, but still.
Other than immigration, in all honesty, what Muslim in America would vote Democrat? What was the point of voting Democrat for them? At least in the most conservative sense of Muslim.
Yeah, but but a plurality of Muslims did still vote for Democrats. So it was kind of, I mean, we have voted for Democrats post 9/11. I mean, because we saw how terrible Republicans were on the Iraq war, on the war on terror. Were great. No, I mean, but look, it's all about a binary choice and picking what is better. I mean, from an Islamic perspective, we're called upon to reduce harm. Right. We're not necessarily expected to find perfect solutions. So I think Democrats are the party that are less bad when it comes to these sorts of things, when it comes to civil liberties abuses against. You just brought up the case of Governor Greg Abbott trying to ban CARE and other Muslim organizations. It's inconceivable to me that Democrats would try something similar. So it comes back to a very kind of essential civil rights argument. Democrats don't repress Muslims the way Republicans do. Republicans don't, the Republican Party is anti-Muslim. And that's just a fact of the matter now.
This is my problem. I feel like you're framing this in the binary of the Democrat and the Republican Party. It's quite clear that Muslims, for example, Muslims it's a big voting issue for them, right? The genocide in Gaza. Muslim voters in America have found Tucker Carlson to be an ally. He's a Republican. They found Candace Owens to be an ally. I know a lot of young people have found Nick Fuentes to be an ally. So is it just the
That's
binary?
concerning. I mean, that last part.
It's true. Is it just the case of the binary of the Democrat versus the Republican, or is it that we're looking at this whole thing wrong? It's quite clear that the binary is grinding to a halt very soon. Maybe. I mean, I could be optimistic, but it's quite clear that within the binary there have become smaller, small, large enough now interest groups that are shaking things up. Unlike ever before, the America First movement is very popular amongst at least Desis. I can speak about Desis because,
Yeah. But I'll just say not all Muslims in America are conservative and strict. So we're a diverse community,
Sure.
and we have different levels of religious practice. So the social and moral issues aren't...
I'm not arguing that the Muslims in America are monolith. My question is, who is the Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes equivalent on the Democrat side? Who is the progressive voice that Muslims are latching on to? Who are these people? I don't see them in the market.
I mean, I guess the closest equivalent is Hassan Piker, someone like him.
Right. But then he would argue the exact opposite of what you're arguing in this book, that America is a center for good. He just screwed up in China big time.
I know, I saw that, yeah. Which is why, like, part of my goal is I want to change the Democratic Party. I want to change how progressives approach these issues, because if we have this, look, I mean, the other thing that I point out in the book, I mean, some of the polling on this is remarkable, that in the early 2000s, close to 90% of Democrats were either extremely or very proud to be American. That number has dropped down to 36% in 2025. So Democrats aren't showing this kind of pride in America that they used to. How can we be an effective party if we don't know how to speak positively about our own country? Americans want to hear a positive message. They want to hear a hopeful message about what their country stands for. And I worry that it's the same thing. You wouldn't want Pakistanis to be self-loathing and to kind of indulge in...
We're one of the most self-loathing people on earth, man.
But is that healthy?
No, of course not. It's been a killer. I think America can do with a healthy dose of cynicism, because you've mostly been Rocky IV for me my whole life. Like, in my head, America's Rocky IV. I don't know if you've seen that film.
Interesting.
It's yeah, you know what I'm
I've
talking
seen
about.
Rocky, maybe not 4.
No,
but
Rocky IV is the one you have to see, because that's the one where he fights the Soviet, right? He fights Dolph Lundgren, who's Swedish, I think.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
He's playing the Soviet character. America is like this, like living in America, that kind of
oh, yeah, right.
Football fields, there's fighter jets going over them, and for no reason, one college varsity football game. That healthy dose of cynicism I can respect. But on the flip side, what people experience in Pakistan or the like is just abject hatred for themselves and the way they are. That's bad too. But I feel like America could do with a dose of cynicism. As opposed to the arguments that you make here that, we're a tragic sort of necessity for the world and we're an overall force for good. I just haven't seen it in the past 2-3 years. Just the past 2-3 years, not even like a 30-year analysis of my life. It's just the past 2-3 years.
So look, I think the better time period to look at is the last 80 years rather than the last 2 to 3 years. We need to have a larger sample size of what the U.S. has done in the world. And when we look at it from that broader historical sweep, I think my argument becomes stronger. Has the U.S. been uniquely bad in the last couple of years? Yes, Gaza looms over all of this. And I talk very openly about how Gaza may be questioned, the whole premise of this book. I almost wondered if I could go on and write it, because would I be comfortable talking to my fellow Muslims and Arab Americans and saying the things that I would say in light of what the U.S. was enabling in Gaza, which was a genocide. And I've been very open about that publicly with using the genocide label and calling that out. But I think that the conclusion that I reached on that was that Gaza was an abdication of American power. We didn't use our power. We allowed Israel to proceed with carte blanche, and we didn't actually use our power to pressure Netanyahu to make concessions, to pressure him to agree to a ceasefire, to pressure him to stop the killing of Palestinians. That would have been the correct use of American power. And we were the only country that could constrain Israel and stop Israel from what it was doing. So at some level, even in the case of Gaza, the U.S. was still the indispensable power. No one, who else could have stopped Israel? If Israel was left to its own devices, it probably would have been even more brutal than it actually was.
I don't agree with that. If America backs off from Israel, I think Israel would be done in a day. I don't think
But that's using our power, backing off by pressuring Israel.
Yeah. So the paradigm of power, whether America backs it or America pushes, the paradigm is still the same because it's the American power that backs it, and it would be American power that would challenge it. I get it. But in a vacuum, to be honest with you, I don't think Israel would survive without American power. It wouldn't survive. And so your whole idea is to put American power to good use, to moral use. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Right. So would you consider yourself as the exact opposite of a Curtis Yarvin type character? Because that's where America seems to be going, like American elite.
Yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah, I would say I'm different than Curtis Yarvin. That I object to a lot of what he says. He doesn't believe in democracy.
No.
He's very open about that. He wants America to be some.
That's my question. Is there a lot of the elite that are the financial backbone of the new tech part of America, especially a lot of the top leadership thinkers, they seem to be going in the opposite direction of what you want them to, and because they would be considered,
and that's disappointing.
They would be considered native as opposed to you. No offense. They would be like real Americans. They would. It seems to me that the pendulum is swinging that way right now, and it's going to swing that way for a while. Does this seem like a bit like a hopeless cause for you? This idea of a moral America?
Look, these people. I would take issue with the implication that they're somehow more American than me. I would say that I'm more American than they are because I actually hold to American ideals and I believe in our republic. They don't believe in America as it is. They don't believe in our constitutional order. So I would actually question their own patriotism and their own commitment to America. If you think America should be a dictatorship or a monarchy, then you're arguing for a completely different America than the one that currently exists. And they want to found a completely new republic on a completely new basis. So I think that, and the great thing about America is that our own Americanness is not determined by our ancestry. If anything, it's determined by our commitment to ideals. And this is why I think children of immigrants in America are oftentimes the more patriotic ones, because we know what the alternative is. Our parents came from dictatorships oftentimes. So we don't take America for granted. We actually appreciate the democracy we have. I've said this publicly before. I think America is the best country in the world currently to be a Muslim, in terms of having the freedom to practice our religion without fear of persecution from the government, without the government telling us how to believe or how to practice. That's a beautiful thing. And so I think that we understand that. We as children of immigrants, we as American Muslims understand something essential about the American project. But yeah, is it disappointing that people like Curtis Yarvin and the new tech elite don't believe in our democratic foundations? Yes. But I think that we have to fight back against their ideas. And unfortunately, their ideas are gaining traction.
Right. It's a fair and noble cause, but to the earlier point, you said that the immigrant American or the sons and daughters of immigrants, they're more sympathetic to what America is or ought to be, and as opposed to the, natives. I'm not saying this to insult you. You know why I'm asking you this.
Yeah, I understand.
That is a notion that is very detested now by the American right and a lot of young white people. I feel like they really detest this idea that there are immigrants outside of America that are somehow more American than them. And you saw that reflected in the H-1B visa debate, where you had people who were the base of the Trump administration, the MAGA base, and they wanted to lynch this guy, Kash Patel, and these kinds of Dinesh D'Souza type characters, because they were like, these Indians who are coming in, they're not real Americans, we're real Americans. That there is a ethnic, cultural makeup, and these are the three distinctions that they usually do. America is Catholic, America is Protestant, and America is Jewish. And those three ethnic subgroups will have ethnic groups like Italians and Irish for the Catholics, and the WASPs and the Germans and the like for the Protestants, and the Jewish Eastern European immigrants that came to America. That's America in their head. And there is a large part of the youth that clearly voted for Trump that think that way. So when you come along and you say, no, I'm equal to you or somehow more American than you, what does that mean for the future? What does that mean going forward?
Well, look, there's a real fight over the sources of American identity. What does it mean to be an American? And we as Americans no longer agree on that question. And there's going to be a fight for the coming decades to define what being American actually means. And we're going to have to see who wins out. I think the Constitution is on our side. I think it's very difficult to make America into a blood and soil ethno-nationalist state, because that's not the way that our institutions are built. That's not the way our laws are designed. So good luck to them in trying to change America. I mean, let's remember also Donald Trump is married to an immigrant. There are a lot of immigrants and children of immigrants in the MAGA coalition because we are a country of immigrants. Yeah, I mean, so there's no way to really escape this. I mean, JD Vance's kids are half Indian. People want to resist this. They want to find a way to avoid it, but there is no way. I mean, Nick Fuentes is part Hispanic. What is he talking about? Like, everyone is part something. There's something very odd about this whole debate where people pretend to be pure Americans. What does it even mean to be a pure American?
I mean, I mostly thought blue jeans, light beer, hamburgers. That's what I was thinking in my head. Right. I'm messing with you. No, listen, as a third party observer with a lot of skin in the game, because don't kill us, please. Don't come here. Right. Don't come here, or we'll have to fight you. And we will have to fight you for decades and decades. No, but as an outside of even as an objective observer at times, it's very funny to me as I would describe myself as a conservative sort of Muslim. These people talk about racial purity and blood and soil and this, that, and the other, and the rise of the far right. This has been fascinating, as well as the far left with the cultural identitarian, sex and gender stuff. All of it has been hilarious for us here as third party observers, but obviously tragic. It's funny in a tragic sort of way. It's not funny in a ha-ha sort of way.
Yeah.
But there's a fascinating thing you said earlier, and coming from a quasi-Islamic republic where the state does tell you how to behave in terms of your religious practice. That's a very fascinating, thing to say, that as a Muslim, I'm better off in America than anywhere else on earth because the state doesn't tell me how my Islam should work. But doesn't it, though?
Doesn't it
sort of tell you the limitations of your Islam?
Can you say a little bit more about what you mean?
Like, in private practice, sure, you're free to be, whatever, queer, the first queer imam or whatever, or the first, trans-abled, whatever. I'm not trying to make fun of that stuff, man, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
you could be the first whatever. But on the other hand, the sort of more public and political and social aspects of Islam at best would be seen as, let's not make a Dearborn, Michigan over here. Don't be too loud with your mosque or whatever, or your public processions or whatever. And at worst would be straight up breaking the American political system or constitutional system, because a lot of people view Islam as something that is political and is outside of themselves as well. It's not something that's
Yeah.
limited to the. It's not an individualistic sort of. It's a very American Islam that you've just espoused, which I'm fine with. But
No, but I think that American Muslims also have the ability to be Salafis. They have the ability to be conservative and strict, just like Orthodox Jews, just like evangelical Christians.
it's in a more
Are there
communal, individual sort of sense in the rituals and practices of religion, as opposed to the outward ideals. Like you wouldn't have somebody like the last time someone had some radical ideas about political Islam, the American government, droned them. There was an American citizen in Yemen.
I mean, yeah, it was also not that this justifies it, but you're also talking about someone who's part of a terrorist organization.
Fair enough, proscribed
So,
organization, but
Yeah,
radical
yeah. So I think it's a
nonetheless.
little bit different. It's not as if the U.S. just goes around like killing Muslims who espouse political Islam. I think
Yeah,
it's. I think that's
have
a
you heard of this
particular.
place? It's called Guantanamo Bay. A lot of my people ended up there. They beat
Yeah,
them.
but
A
that's
lot of
not
them.
because. Right, but
But wasn't the idea
yeah,
that their
but
Islam was political? It was Islamist or whatever. What are the terms that you guys have come up with? A lot of these.
yeah, but America doesn't target all Islamists. I mean, generally, it's
Just most
been
of them.
no, no. I mean, the minority who use violence, and that doesn't justify Guantanamo. But I'm just saying that that was in the context of the Afghanistan war against the Taliban and Al Qaeda, and that's very different than. I mean, there aren't Muslim Brotherhood members in Guantanamo. So I want to nuance that
They're all
picture a
in
little
care,
bit.
right?
They're all in care.
Yeah, they're not.
Oh
in
yeah,
one-
in care. Yeah, but like I don't think constitutionally you can't ban the Muslim. I mean, people can try, and we're gonna see what those legal challenges look like. And you're right that the freedom that Muslims have is being challenged right now. But I'm saying up until Donald Trump, and this just shows that Donald Trump is bad for Muslims. I mean, you're sort of proving my point on that. That up until Donald Trump, the freedom that American Muslims had was pretty wide and pretty far reaching. No one tells me how to practice. I can pray on the street. This is a remarkable thing. There are Muslim majority countries where you can't pray Jama'ah on the street without the police coming because they see that as a threat to their own self-preservation. They worry that people gathering in the mosque will lead to a greater opposition. The mosques are often closed. My parents just came back from Uzbekistan and they closed the mosque outside of the main prayer times because they don't want people to gather. So
Uzbekistan
there's
is an
so
ally
many-
of whom?
what do you mean? It's an ally of.
Uzbekistan is an American ally. America
Ye-
maintains and refurbishes the dictatorship that does not allow political Islam to manifest. So American
Yeah, and I want
Muslims
that to change.
American Muslims have it good because they can pray on the street or they can be queer and openly Muslim or whatever, but Muslims in the
I didn't
actual
say anything about
homeland
being-
can get messed up or whatever because they espouse political Islam. Do you get the problem that I have with your argument?
Yeah, but I'm just like my basic point
and with Trump
here-
also, by
Yeah.
the way, it's not that people don't realize that he's no good for us, but there's almost like a nihilistic sort of accelerationism with him, where like, yeah, say the quiet part out loud. We know what you actually think about us. Like with Obama, with Bush, with Biden, it was much more of the same. When the Biden admin was asked about the Gaza genocide, they would simply shrug it away because they were like, who are Muslims going to vote for other than us? Because, we treat them mildly like human beings. I mean, it's a very America-centered, like American Muslims get to pray on the street. But Uzbekistan maybe wouldn't. And you're right, they are closed, the mosques are closed, but it seems to me there is some game of an American Muslim gets to enjoy this XYZ kind of lifestyle and someone else somewhere else has to pay the price for it. That's the
Yeah,
kind of
I don't. Yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. I don't really think that Uzbek Muslims have to pay the price for our freedom. I don't think that's really what's going on here. I'm just making a narrower point that America is a good place to be Muslim because we can be fully ourselves and also fully American. And I've also it's been really remarkable to watch my parents become American. I mean, watching that and seeing them have a real pride and appreciation for their adopted country. You can't become Swedish. You can't become Norwegian, because those are, like, ultimately there's an ethnic basis. To be a Swede is not something anyone can be, but anyone can become an American. So all I'm saying is that we have to appreciate that America has some good things about it. And I just want people to appreciate that in the end.
Without
it's
a doubt,
not
man.
always.
That's extremely impressive, because I mean, a lot of people thought that you could become British. Turns out you can't. You'll always be Mir Puri or Pakistani or whatever. Yeah, sorry, that was a joke at our own behest, but
No, okay, right.
it's not the same. It's not the same. I mean, maybe Canada has a bit of that. Maybe by some extension,
Yeah.
Australia has a bit of that. But then again, that's just America's sort of shadow being reflected over that particular
Yeah,
part of
right.
the world, right? And I get that. It's something that everybody respects. Other than the amazing actual continent that you guys have, which is insane, which I've always dreamed of seeing. But I'm very scared of coming to America, especially now since Sami Hamdi got busted up.
You might want to wait for when a Democrat wins the presidency. Then
I
you
don't
can
know,
probably
man.
come.
I don't know, man. Obama was pretty spooky too. Obama was pretty scary too. I mean, at least for Pakistan, he was. He killed a lot of my fellow countrymen. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think everybody does respect the idea of America being something special. What do you make of, and in closing, I'd just like to ask you, what do you make of this whole situation about the idea of China being an inevitable power and then having this multipolar world, which we haven't discussed yet. We never really exited America. We never discussed the multipolarity, the attraction of the multipolar world. But is it inevitable? Is China just unstoppable power that's going to keep rising, and then it's going to be another pole or axis in the East?
I think China's rise is greatly exaggerated. There's this, and we've seen evidence of that exaggeration. I mean, during COVID, China's economy ground to a halt and almost went down to something close to 0% growth for a little while. Why? Because they were so preoccupied with the zero COVID policy, because President Xi saw that as part of his legacy, as part of what defined his time in this leadership role, was to promote these policies. And like we talked about earlier briefly, there was no recourse. Chinese citizens could not alter that policy. The other thing that's worth noting is, well, I think there's the basic argument that an authoritarian, totalitarian regime is not going to be able to have the same level of innovation and creativity that a country like the US does, because people are ultimately afraid. They're afraid of crossing the Chinese Communist Party. They're afraid of being persecuted. So they have to be so careful with what they say or do, and everyone's watching their back. I don't think that's a recipe for a long-term sustainable approach to innovation. The other thing that I would say is China's population is shrinking. Its fertility rate is around 1.1, which is half of the replacement rate of 2.1, almost half. And what that means is that China's economy will suffer unless they can replenish their own people. But they have no obvious way of doing that because they don't allow for immigration. You can't become a Chinese citizen. So China is going to face a real economic cliff in the coming decades in a way that's not fully anticipated because of their birth rate. So I think there's these longer term structural deficits in the Chinese governmental approach that we're going to see. And so I think that we've been very optimistic about China in a way that doesn't match the reality.
Fair point, I think. And I think regardless of how close we are in proximity to China, I think a lot of people are blind to the fact that there's all these major question marks when it comes to the rise of China. Again, in terms of Pakistan allying with China and sort of depending on a not an altogether equal and opposite pole, but definitely like an alternative that exists, that is going to continue because of our proximity to China and then obviously our historical relationship. But yeah, you're right. It's not as easy as it looks. And America has the ability to replenish their population through immigration, through all these other tactics. It can attract the most ingenious, most creative workers on earth. It has a lot of room and freedom to allow the market to operate. It's quite clear that is a more winning model than what the Chinese might have. I'm not going to push back on with you with the ideas of how in the tech market and in military tech, China has been competing, but it's not the same as the sort of base innovations that American society has achieved in even the 1950s, 60s, or 70s. Very impressive stuff, without a doubt, in the realms of science and technology. Just in closing, again, this is one thing that I really want to know is that what's going to happen post 7th of October? Are we just going to go back to the 6th? Will America be the same? Is it really even affected deeply by that? Is the moral question of Gaza, does it demand justice? Does it demand some kind of, recourse? Or, things will just go back to business as usual at some point when people will get over it?
It demands justice. I think it's the moral crisis of the moral question and the moral crisis of our time. And I think that in the Democratic Party, the issue of Gaza and how we remember Gaza will be a key issue internally, that there are opposing factions in the party. One is more pro-Israel, one is more progressive and pro-Palestine. And there's something heartening about the fact that progressive voices in the Democratic Party are rising and they're making Gaza a central issue. The fact that Zohran Mamdani, a Muslim, could become the mayor of the largest city in America is a remarkable thing. And he did that in part because he spoke truth to power on the question of Gaza. So I see the Democratic Party changing. And I think that if the Democrats can have a candidate in 2028 who is more sympathetic to the Palestinians, you're going to see a major change in this country at the level of power. And that's something that I'm hoping for and I'm optimistic about.
Right. Fair enough. I mean, the moral issue or the moral question for America is the Gaza question. Joe Biden in his election campaign said that the biggest moral question that we face is the transgender issue. It's a big departure from, Biden's failed campaign to Mamdani, And you're right. It's very fascinating. It's a unique case with Mamdani because he can't get elected beyond a certain point because of his birth outside of America. But it is a fascinating phenomenon, definitely, and it has captured the imagination of the whole world. By the way, the whole Muslim world, especially. So we do see and respect that power that still exists at the core of and the heart of America. Shadi, sir, you've been great, man. Thank you so much for your time. I hope.
I really enjoyed this. Thanks so much.